Welcome back to today's video. In today's video, we're going to be looking at the U.S. Senate for the 2024 election. Now, as we get into today's video, guys, do me a favor and hit the subscribe button down below. Make sure you like this video and subscribe. It really helps out with the algorithm to do that, and it really helps out to reach 200 subscribers, which is our goal relatively soon to reach 200 subscribers. So, as we get into today's video, we're going to be looking at the U.S. Senate for the 2024 election. For the U.S. Senate in the 2024 election, we see that we have 34 toss-up seats that are available for either party to take control of. So let's go ahead and start with some of the safe states for either candidate. Without any further ado, let's go ahead and give several of the safe states on the extremities of the electoral map on the east and western coasts. Then we will follow that up by giving some of the safe Republican states to either party. The states of New Mexico and Hawaii are two states which will vote solidly Democrat by a most likely margin there. We'll also go ahead and give the state of Wyoming, the state of Utah, the state of Tennessee, the state of Mississippi, the state of Indiana, the state of North Dakota, the state of Florida by a likely margin. We'll also go ahead and give the state of Missouri by a likely margin. We'll go ahead and give, that's about it for that. So that's about it for that. Those are the safe states. We have 14 toss-up states left. Now let's take a look at some polling data from some of these states. Let's go ahead and start with the state of Texas here. In the state of Texas, let's go ahead and look at some polls here. We see that Republican incumbent Ted Cruz, who is running for his third time in re-election, is 16 points ahead of the Democratic incumbent Gutierrez and Al Red. We can see that Ted Cruz is doing relatively good there, according to polling data. That being said, he did win re-election in 2018 by a slim 3-point margin, which will set up hopes for Democrats to possibly flip that state in future elections. Although that being said, Democrats should be able to win in the state of Texas Republicans rather, will win by a likely margin there for the Republicans. In the state of Nevada and Arizona, let's go ahead and start with Arizona, and then we'll move on to some other states there. So for the state of Arizona, let's go ahead and start by looking at some of the polling data, who's running, what's exactly happening in this state. So for Arizona, we see that Kari Lake, who ran previously for the Senate in Arizona, is actually trying to run again and make a comeback. She, according to this poll, is 6 points ahead of her possible Democrat competitor, and in this poll, the Democratic competitor is 5 points ahead of her. So based on that, we can see that they are basically statistically tied. Kari Lake is 1 point ahead. Although that being said, I do not believe that Kari Lake's favorability rating is very high, considering the fact that she already ran before. And typically, when you run for one place one time, and then you're running a second time after losing, you're generally not gonna win any election. So for Kari Lake, we're gonna go ahead and give the state of Arizona by a lean margin for the Democrats there. Democrats should be able to win by a lean margin. But the fact of the matter is that after the 2022 midterm election, Republicans definitely have to be very, very skeptical about polls and aggregates that show them ahead because of the fact that they were very wrong in the 2022 midterm election and the fact that they could be wrong in this election as well. For the state of Wisconsin, we're going to go ahead and give it to the Democrats by a tilt margin. The state of Michigan will vote for Democrats by a lean margin. The state of Pennsylvania will vote for Democrats by a tilt margin also. Pennsylvania voted for John Fetterman by a 5-point margin. Michigan is an extremely liberal state with regards to the Senate. Now, with regards to the presidency, it's a very much of a swing state. Wisconsin is a state which Democrats have been doing relatively good in. Besides the 2022 midterm election, they have been relatively good in the Wisconsin State Supreme Court, and in many aggregates, Democrats are ahead for the Rust Belt here. So Democrats will win in the Rust Belt, leaving them with 44 seats versus Republicans' 47 seats. We still have 9 seats ready to go. For the state of Nevada, we're going to go ahead and give it as being tilt for the Democrats there. Democrats should win by a tilt margin, a small tilt margin there. It is a state which Democrats were able to win in the 2022 midterm election. They were able to win by a very small margin, although they were not expected to win. They were not expected to win that much according to aggregates. They did end up winning by a relatively small margin. I do think that they're going to be able to win again by a small margin there. For the state of West Virginia, now the state of West Virginia is pretty interesting. It is actually democratically run currently by Senator Joe Manchin. Now, Joe Manchin is much more to the moderate side of the Democratic Party. So because of that, she was able to win in that particular state, which is an extremely Republican state when you look at that in retrospect, in hindsight. Um, Well, that being said, he will not be actually running for re-election, leaving most likely a more liberal or more progressive Democrat to run in his place, and most likely that liberal or progressive Democrat will not be able to win, considering the fact that Joe Manchin, who is much more conservative than most of the Democratic Party, than most of the members of the Democratic Party, and has voted against a lot of the bills passed by Joe Biden. He has voted for a majority of them, I do believe, but not all of them, unlike most Democrats. So because of that, if he's replaced by a more left-wing Democrat, the left-wing Democrat will probably do worse than him. And Jim Justice, who is the most likely Republican rival, will most likely be able to take them and win them over, win West Virginians over by a relatively good margin. So for the Republicans there, they will win in the state of West Virginia by a lean margin. For the state of Minnesota, we're going to go ahead and give it to Democrats by a lean margin there. Democrats should be able to win by a lean margin. So we'll go ahead and give them that particular state by a lean margin. Democrats do relatively good in the Senate. For that state, they do relatively good in the presidency as well, although it may be a swing state in the general election for the 2024 race, although it is generally typically Democrat. For the state of Maine, we'll go ahead and give it to Democrats by a lean margin. We'll also go ahead and give Virginia to the Democrats by a tilt margin for the Democrats there in the state of Virginia. Also, in the state of Nebraska, we're going to go ahead and give it to Republicans by a tiny margin there. Not a tiny margin, by a likely margin there with regards to the main portion of Nebraska. We'll take a look at one of the districts in the state of Nebraska, which will also be contested in 2024. We'll take a look at that district as well. Before we do that, let's take a look at the state of Montana. For the state of Montana, let's take a look. Sorry, it's the state of Ohio. We'll go for the state of Ohio first, and then we'll move on to the state of Montana. We can see the Democrats are doing relatively good with regard to the polling data. They are running an incumbent who has already won Ohioans over, and he is doing relatively good in most of the polls. Now, Republicans do seem to be doing good in a few of these polls by tiny margins, whoever the Republican may be, although the Democrat incumbent does seem to be doing relatively well. Because of that, we're going to go ahead and give it to the Democrats by a lean margin there, Ohio by a lean margin. For our next state here, for the state of Nebraska and one of its congressional districts, we're going to go ahead and give its congressional district as being tilt for the Republicans there. It will be going as tilt for the Republicans. An extremely small district, although I do believe that it will be going as tilt for the Republicans. An extremely important district for Republicans going into 2024. Now for our last state, the state of Montana. For the state of Montana, we can see the Democrats and Republicans are relatively tied according to most of these polls. Although that being said, you can see the tester, who is actually the Republican incumbent, sorry, the Democrat incumbent. He is running as an incumbent, and as we saw in the 2022 midterm election, polls generally tend to overestimate Republicans in the Senate. And because of that, the fact that they are generally tied here in a majority of these polls, I'm going to go ahead and give it to the Democrats there by a very small tilt margin there, to the Democrats. I do think they're going to win in that state. That leaves 0 toss-up states left. Democrats and Republicans are at 50 seats respectively there. We can see for these states here. Now write down in the comment section whether or not you agree or disagree with this electoral map. If you agree, then that's good. But if you disagree, make sure that you write that down in the comments, and I'll try to respond to as many comments as possible. I try to respond to as many comments as possible, so make sure that you leave them down in the comment section below. Make sure you subscribe and like the video. It really helps out. We're going to reach 200 subscribers relatively soon, so make sure you do that, and that'll really help out, and I'll see you in the next video.